All right. Good evening to those of you on the East Coast. Good afternoon to those of you on the West Coast. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. Thanks so much for joining us. We were having a slight tech matter to take care of, but we are back. If you're taking a look at the title, you'll see that we will be talking about Small Press Expo, this year's edition of it, if you will, and it was happening not just yesterday, but also today as well, wrapping up today. And if you're not familiar with the show, it is a show which promotes artists and publishers who produce independent comics. So I wanted to kind of get my perspective, my thoughts on it of this year's show, but I also will not be alone in talking about this year's show as well. If he's not a stranger to the show, friend of the show, they bring their talents not just in the world of comics, as a creator of the web comic known as Ants. They also bring their talents also as a critic as well, being a member of the Washington Area Film Critics Association, as well as a certified critic with Rotten Tomato. So it is my pleasure to welcome on Julian Lytle. Welcome him back. What's up, man? How you doing?
Hello to my messy apartment.
So first and foremost, man, as I said, we had the show happening. As I said yesterday as well as today. I know you literally, as you say, you're in your apartment now, just getting back. Can talk just briefly, for you, what it was to do this year's show.
So this was like the first year back after the pandemic. So the last Small Press Expo was in 2019. The last 2 years before were canceled because of the pandemic and COVID. So yeah, it was interesting getting being back in that space. They had certain precautions like people wearing masks and such. But clearly, people were ready to come back. They were ready to um, get back in the space of finding these little indie gems and small press, and along with many different panels and uh, create panels with creators and the like.
All right, awesome,
I
awesome.
think
Um,
Brandon might have got dropped out.
No, no, no,
Oh,
no.
he's
I'm
back.
still here.
Here he
Yeah,
is.
no, I had you singled
There we
out
go.
there.
It looks like
But I guess I feel like perhaps the best
so.
way to
Yeah, Small Press
go ahead.
Expo. Oh, okay. Small Press Expo takes place in what is now called North Bethesda, uh, by the smart people in Montgomery County, and Maryland, and the like, to sell more real estate. Um, used
Wow,
to
I
be
feel
known as
like we could do a
Whitesmith.
whole other show of that, but yes, yes,
Uh,
continue.
yeah, it's 2 days. It's not doesn't need to be a third day because a nice weekend show. Most of the It's a lot of small independent publishers, some very much historic within comics like Fantagraphics, Top Shelf, No Brow, and many other that puts out works. I would say that's even more independent leaning than you would even get from, let's say, Image Comics or Vault or Aftershock. Any of those ones you might see it a San Diego, a C2E2, or
Sure.
a New York Comic Con.
Gotcha, gotcha. And I guess I feel like the best way to go about this is, to talk about the wins and losses, if you will, the wins and the tweaks. And I'll start first with the wins, and I mean there were a great deal of them. And I'll start kind of with like a lot of the housekeeping stuff, in terms of the protocols that they had, with obviously, as you were mentioning at the top of us still being in the midst of COVID, whether people want to like, uh, uh, admit it or not, even though it feels like we're on the tail end of it, it's still out there, and so it's still important to have that safety in an event, in any group event, and I feel like they were thorough and had good follow through with what they said that they were going to do in regards to being safe in that regard. I feel like there have been shows that I have attended where they've spoken a good game, so to speak, of a lot of the things that they're going to do, and it's been difficult for them to actually enforce it or implement it. And it may just be because they're larger shows, so I guess because of there being more moving parts, if you will, that it's trickier to enforce it in that way. So I would say a shout out to that. Also, with the size too, you were talking about a lot of the larger shows, the fact that since it is a smaller show, um, there is an ability to take in and consume more things, I feel, than at a larger show where you might get distracted by so many different things um that are trying to grab your attention as an attendee. And then another thing I was going to say, housekeeping wise, which is a big stickler for me, and I don't know if you feel this way, but I know a lot of folks out there know what I'm talking about, is the signage. Like, I feel like the signage was good at the show, because I've been at shows where the signage is not that great, and you're running around with like a chicken with your head cut off, trying to figure out where things are because there's not proper signage of where things are. And I didn't feel like that was the case, with this show. And I don't know if you feel that way either. As someone who had a table, I know a lot of times, even whether you're on the attendee side, the media side, there's a guest as an exhibitor. Those still can also be things that can be frustrating. If you're trying to make your way around of where you're bringing in, shipping in, your supplies, where you're taking your supplies in order to bring it to your table, and like the logistics of that. So would you say, is that something that worked relatively smoothly for you, or was it were there some issues with that when you're
No, they pretty much have a standard practice of how they like to lay out and display or have their type of signage, how they so you can get around the actual show floor, the expo floor, since it's in like a
Yep,
an
yep.
hotel conference center or convention center. A lot of the signage is also, video screens handled by the hotel, so it's like where all the rooms are because it's not really that vast. They make sure they have the entire schedule up on all those signage near those rooms for panels. They also, yeah, they always keep a nice, signage so you know where you're going. It's not too far around. Everything is kind of centered. And then, they always like to use the balloons as the letters for the tables. And as you said, you can go to some conventions that have a lot more money and a lot bigger spaces. And the fact that you can't tell what the aisles and the rows are
Or just where
is
certain things are, like where
it's
where
it's,
where's
it's
my
very
artist alley,
yeah.
where am I going to
Yeah.
my panels, like just basic stuff. So
Yeah, yeah. It's always something that bothers me with conventions. And like, why do I not know where I'm at? And why can't you get this done? You have Teamsters. I don't understand.
right, right.
This is very much a bunch of volunteers in a hotel convention center. They got balloons of letters to let you know what aisle you're in, and everybody has a sign. They make a map, and then you can find out where everybody is.
And I was
So
gonna say,
yeah, they have the usual standard quality level of knowing, be able to lay things out so you know where in the world you're supposed to be at.
speaking of volunteers, I want to give a shout out to the volunteers too, because uh a lot of times at other shows, and I mean, unfortunately, it's not really the fault of the volunteers, but because there's so many moving parts, a lot of things get lost in translation, and they're not the volunteers in other shows that I've attended are not always the best informed of where things are, and of what needs to be done and how things need to be executed. And I didn't feel like that was the case, when I went to small press. So I want to give a shout out to
Yeah,
them, and also whoever was in charge of ensuring that the volunteers were well informed of the information that people would need to know. And then I was going to say, just in general, just the idea that, as I said, this is a smaller show, but it still has, all the things that you would come to expect from from a con. You have you have exhibitors, you have artists, and you're able to, check out their tables of the various works that they have, and then you also have your panels as well. Their workshops too, which I love, especially with the mission that we have at Movers and Shakers of, understanding all the many facets of what it takes to, be in the industry, in the comics industry. So, that was cool too, and being able to sit in on a lot of those workshops was cool. Um, but just overall, just that idea of, I like it when a show knows what it is and it executes that, because I feel like there are shows out there where, they're presenting themselves as one, as something specifically niche, and I don't know if it's just a matter of trying to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, that they, still try to to dabble in other things when it's not really within what it is that they are promoting themselves as, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
With you, I guess, were there any things? Because I know you were mentioning at the top of being back. Were there any things that, come to mind for you that maybe with this show that you didn't anticipate, that you didn't really come across in prior shows, or say prior editions of this show, or was it relatively the same on what you expected?
It was pretty much the same. It's just seeing how well it would bounce back after 2 years of not being there. If people were going to be able to come and it would have a decent enough audience and traffic and flow. Um, yeah, this con is different because a lot of it is a labor of love for the people who work there. So like, shout out to Devon Sanders who runs the volunteers at the show. Who runs that part of the staff to make sure people are helpful and can do all that type of things. Yeah, the Small Press Expo is it for a lot of ways a safe space for people, for different groups that I would say even within the comic book space and the geek space, and I would say at this point the geek space is very mainstream to the point where it's not a niche thing; it's very mainstream. Uh, it's just a place where a lot of people feel free and comfortable, you know, within LGBTQIA plus young people. People probably didn't fit in. People were able to tell stories that doesn't get a lot of show. People get to be a lot open in places they don't always get to be. Um, these are the people who don't actually want to go to San Diego and don't want to be in those conventions. And uh, yeah, it's very young, and there's not a lot of turnover, but there's always new people coming in each and every year. So it's a much what I expected. I expect to see new faces. It's been a couple years, so you can get some new people who's been trying to get in and making their own comics, and they were there. Um, yeah, the only thing they didn't have this year was the prom, and I understand because that of COVID and everything. But I think people still found a way to gather after the show at one of the little local establishments. I'm too old for that at this point. Uh, but you
So
know,
let me ask this, because I know you have, um, just digging deep on what you were commenting on. I know that you mix it up and you go to the, the larger shows, and you go to the smaller shows as well. And in terms of what it's like to have a table at Small Press versus having it, and I mean, I know you've commented on it, broadly, but in terms of like more specifically, I know you've, been at, New York, at Baltimore, at, San Diego, and then we were just talking about that just now. And what what would you say is, I mean, I know we've commented on it on the fact that of what the mission of the show is, but what specifically would you say is something that you feel that you still, because as you said there's some folks who don't go to the larger shows. What is it that you would say that you still enjoy about going to those larger shows, even though those niche shows can be a lot more, I feel like, rewarding in terms of um, getting into a lot of works creatively that may not always be have an opportunity to get in front of a ton of eyes at a larger show.
Okay, the reason I go to bigger shows is because I've been doing this for a while, and
Right.
it's a way to see people that I don't always get a chance to see. So let's start with kind of where we're located. Let's say a local show. There's two
Yeah.
local shows in that type of mainstream space, which is Awesome Con, which is basically becoming a pop culture convention, more or less anything to do with comics at all,
Right.
versus say Baltimore Comic Con, which I say uh has more a bit in line with Small Press Expo, but just on the mainstream end. So like if you want to see some of your favorite artists that's doing Marvel and DC books historically and current, some image titles, maybe some of the scholastic young adult, middle grade kids books, and buy comic books, like actual comic books, and not meet celebrities, not get no picture taken. There'll be some cosplayers, but see, digging through long boxes, you go to Baltimore. That's essentially what I'm going there for. I'm literally trying to find like some old books, some deals, see some folks that I know, and they enjoy it. And then you get the the 5,000 pound gorillas of San Diego and New York, which is media shows that has comics are important to their creation, so they're still there. But it's also like, well, those type of shows is like, oh, well, I'm trying to meet some editors. I'm trying to see some folks I know. I'm still trying to see folks I know to connect to different things. It's business opportunities. But for a fan or a fan or a consumer or something, people in San Diego, they go for Hall H. We know
Sure.
people who
Sure.
just
Sure.
generally
Sure.
go for Hall H, even though you can go there and see some of the stuff from E3 for video games. There's people who go there for video games who don't care about a panel about some movie or TV show or designer toys. A lot of those things are at those really huge shows. Then you get shows like the C2E2s in Baltimore, will still have a tie to comics, to the people who make comics and promoting comics, but the mainstream, the corporations who have a lot of money. And then you get to the Mocha Fest and the TIFF and the TCAFs and stuff, and Small Press Expo that are like, oh, these are the people that make comics for the love of comics, but then they might also end up getting some of those Scholastic books or
Right.
Penguin Random House books, or those are the ones who end up getting the jobs at Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon and Disney and designing those cartoons that become huge hits. Like you wouldn't have Adventure Time, you wouldn't have Regular Show, you wouldn't have Steven Universe, you wouldn't have Way Out Yonder and Owl House and all those type of things without shows on without SPX and Mocha and TCAF and things like that. A lot of SPX, like you wouldn't have Steven Universe without SPX. You wouldn't have a lot of those shows. Those Cartoon Network shows from 2010 to let's say 2018, they wouldn't exist. That's where they do all their hunting. That's where they do all their talent
And
hunting.
I will give you that because in the few years that I've gone to small press, it's been fascinating. It's funny that I think of it almost as like a lineup of like superhero teams. You know how they go through different lineups over the eras, and the same can be said with small press where there's some folks that I've seen there that I haven't seen back, and I mean they're doing other things.
Hmm.
They're doing cool things now, but that foundation was set at small press. Like they were at small press first, and I mean they still come back on occasion, but it's still been fascinating to see that uh, to observe that evolution where you have folks that are small press they stay very niche in that way, and then you have folks that they are starting at small press, and then they may come back to small press. They may just do the larger shows, and just to see that trajectory of a lot of folks has been fascinating. That I've seen at small press, and how their careers have taken off. Um, so I guess uh, in terms of, because I didn't even touch, haven't even share asked this of you, is, as I mentioned at the top, you have the web comic ants, and um, you know I didn't even know this about you, and I know we've known each other for a while. Just the idea of your thoughts of the nature of digital comics and where they are going. So in terms of the current status, because I think you have been you've mentioned or been quoted as saying that with comics in general, it feels like it's in a state of flux of where it's going, and what direction it's going to be taken. And so, and I want to say it was a couple of years ago that you were quoted as saying that. I want to say was if I'm looking at it, remembering correctly, I want to say it was with Washington City Paper a couple of years ago.
That was a while
Yeah, I
ago.
know, a
Last
little
time I
while
talked
ago,
to
a
them,
couple of years ago.
long a while ago, longer than that. Obama was president.
but still, like, even in the nature of the landscape that we're in now, with just getting out of, and still to a degree, as I said, being in the pandemic, and how that's changed everything in terms of media. Would you say you still are in that mindset of what you had mentioned then, or has that changed or evolved, of like
It probably
where you're picturing where digital comics are going, and where maybe some other facets in the industry are going?
it's changed greatly probably since that interview that I did with City Paper. Um, at that time, there wasn't Webtoons didn't hit in America yet. Um, Tapas didn't. I don't even think Tapas existed in America. And in a lot of ways, the importing of the Korean method, South Korean method of reading comics on a mobile device, is greatly changing the nature of comics and already impacting the media in general, because there are certain things that are a hit that wouldn't be classically thought of as a hit in the mainstream through print media. There's a lot of uh, female centered comics, and female in terms of, there's comics marketed toward young girls, teenage girls, and young women and older women that get millions of hits and views uh, per day, per week, per month. Um, yeah, shoot. There's a comic that I read all the time. It's a retelling of the story of Persephone and Hades and their love, but
Mm,
in like a modern take.
okay.
It's been on the New York Times bestseller list. The print, or each volume that's released, is has a show in development with the Henson company. It it has like over uh I don't know, maybe 20 million like subscribers. There's a God the like a Tower of God or God of High School that's already a popular um Crunchyroll anime. There's two different shows. Netflix hits from this year from South Korea. That's global hits based off of comics that's on Webtoons, and it's to the point where even DC make work with the company to put out specific comics for that platform with the characters that are different from the ones that you might read every month. And the most popular Batman comic is the comic that is on that platform with over 600,000 subscribers. Um, yeah, it can't reading I think when I did that interview, it was still within the first mode of web comics of you people going to a website and reading. Now it's using these platforms, and you could upload your own stuff. You gotta think of it just like as you would YouTube or Twitch or any of these things else. And after a certain point, you might get, if you get a certain following, a certain hits and subscribers and attention, they might make you a deal. They'll give you money, and then things open up, and then you start getting representation, and they got a partnership with like CAA and everything else. Like
Yeah,
once you get to a certain thing, it's totally going to change because most of the people in the world, um, let's be honest, kids don't read. They read books. They get those books. They got those book fairs. They go to the libraries, and there's a point in which a lot of people in the world, they always have their phone. If they got ways to read content on their phone, it's even they're going to go that. It's even affecting the manga industry in Japan, which is something that a lot of people don't pay attention to or listen. Because, gotta be honest, they outsell everybody in print as it is. We still look at them as a paragon of like, oh, this we can do it like that. Well, what people don't pay attention to, well, a lot of that model of what you think is great is actually losing numbers to people reading manga on the phone. So if you think of what probably the places was just like comics heaven for a lot of people shifting to that, of course it's going to follow. Who knows if comics even matters within the mainstream here with superheroes? Who knows if they're going to falter? But I think within small press, there will always be type of stories that will feed into other things, and it's going to change. And the idea with web comics being a niche, I don't think it's going to be a niche. It'll probably be the dominant form of reading, a medium of words and pictures together telling funny stories. Will eventually will just be digitally versus print, and print becomes this little art object. It's kind of like with music now. People don't buy music except for
I don't know.
old
Last
people
time I
like
listened to
me.
radio, I haven't listened to radio in like
Yeah,
6, 7 years because you have all of these, platforms that, even with a lot of mobile providers that allow you to instantly, have access to
yeah.
music. So
And
no,
the shows you don't even need. Like if you want to know what's going on in the Breakfast Club, you just wait for the YouTube video to go up. You
yeah.
don't. Why am I listening to the radio? Well, I got to deal with the commercials. That's going to affect other forms of media as well. So yeah, it's
But I would
things are always
say,
going to change.
and
People can
speaking of
bounce
that,
back.
and then let me make a correction on that. I realize, think for whatever reason, it happened 11 years ago. So it was like in a whole other decade. But I guess, and you answered it, is just the idea of where your mindset was then, and having any anticipation of where it would lead here and now. And I mean, as I said, you already answered it. But I would also say, in commenting further on what you were saying, it will be interesting to see what's going to happen with with the various forms of media that we have now, because especially particularly with streaming, as the streaming wars, so to speak, as we knew that it was coming and it was going to be a Goliath to deal with. But now that we've had this time where a lot of people have been at home for a great deal of their time, even more so than they anticipated they would, I feel like that war, so to speak, has picked up, where we have a lot of streamers that we wouldn't otherwise anticipate that we would have. We have, HBO Max, and we have, you have Paramount Plus, and you have all these other, streamers where it was only a couple of, galots in the room, so to speak. And now you have additional ones. It seems like brand new ones, rising. It seems like every couple of months. It feels like, I'm sure it's not that frequently, but it feels that way. And so it's been interesting in that way of, because there's more variety now, that a lot of quote unquote the old heads of the streaming world are now coming up with other levels of subscription in order to generate additional revenue, because they have to also compete with the new kids on the block, so to speak. So they have to generate additional sources. So like, you have some of those streamers that are now um giving you a different, they're doing one or two things. They're raising the prices of their subscription, and then in order to give you a quote unquote cheaper level of subscription, they're adding some form of ad space. So that, like, that part of it has been interesting, and how that has like evolved in the world of
Yeah, they gotta make
streaming.
money.
Yeah, yeah, of course. But I was just
They
saying,
wasn't making any money, so it's just like, it was Hulu was always out there with the whole like ads, or you give us more money, you don't got no ads, and people was like,
right,
I would never pay. I don't know. I was like, okay, all right, okay, yeah. Netflix costs $20 if you want 4K.
right,
4K for $20 a month. $20. I pay it because I
right,
got 4K.
right.
And like I don't want no downgrade for $20.
Yeah,
Yeah. Let me see how this is gonna
that's a
work
cheap
out.
cell phone bill. That's a cheap cell phone bill. So
Xbox Game Pass is $15 a month. 250 video games. Hours to put hours of content. See,
yeah, I
it's a
remember
whole
way back
different, it's a
when
whole
what
different thing.
when Netflix was what was it like?
It's like $7.
Yeah, it's
$7.
like twice that now. So it's crazy.
3 times that. These people playing games. They forget. They wanted to cut the cord, see what happened. All the prices went up. They still paying cable prices.
So,
We
but yeah.
was living as kings, and this is what the millennials chose. Cut the cable.
But on that note, Julie, I'm gonna let you go, man. I know it's getting late, and I appreciate you hopping on. I know you had literally just arrived at home when you hopped on the show, so I appreciate you hopping on again. Before I let you go, can you tell folks where they can find you?
On social media, my handle is Julian Lytle, Lytle. It's like that on every social media platform I can think of that matters. Maybe some dead ones too. Um, Most of my reviews are on Adobe.com. It's an internet radio station focusing on alternative punk and pop punk music and such. Um, yeah, if you don't want to go there, you could just search my name in Rotten Tomatoes and you'll get all my reviews. Uh, I'm also part of the Critics Choice Association. I don't know. I guess I didn't tell you about that one, Brandon. So I'm
Oh,
trying to
no,
work
no,
my way up
no,
this
yeah, yeah.
ladder,
Congrats. I meant to add that as well, man. That's awesome.
getting up in this ladder. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Having a
I
vote.
see you. I see
Uh,
you.
and you'll see if I get any more comic work or any more television work. If I consulted on a TV show for CW called Naomi, based off of the DC Comics character. It unluckily got canceled, like everything else on that network. Oh, excuse me. And but yeah, go stream it on HBO Max and go buy that Blu-ray. Uh, Watch it on demand, maybe if you're on your Verizon Fios or your Comcast or whatever. It's up there, but it was a good show.
All right, bet,
Uh,
bet, bet. So again, I want to thank Julian for hopping on and talking about Small Press Expo. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, host and co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. You can find me just down below, Brandon Troy ENT on Twitter and Brandon Troy _ENT on Instagram. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be safe out there, and see you soon. Peace.